Welcome back with a smiling face. Important note before starting, if you are a fan of audio stories, then our Patreon account is the best platform for you. Join us on Patreon for the best audiobooks ever. His Revenge. Episode 5. Chapter 34-42. Azalea. Showering was a chore. Liam must still be frustrated because he didn't even try to get in with me. When I started moving around, a dull pain started randomly striking along my side. I tried to ignore it. When I came out of the bathroom, Liam was leaning against the kitchen counter on his phone. I went to the closet, where I put my bag to get dressed. I pulled on a loose-fitting, baby pink dress and grabbed a pair of simple white sandals. When I exited the closet, Liam set down a plate with a muffin on it and a glass of juice on the table. I smiled as I came over to him. "Cranberry?" I asked. He nodded with his own smile. I sat down and started picking the muffin apart. "Are you coming with me to Amy's?" I asked. "I thought I would. Now that I am here, I might as well stay until you go back," he said. "Who is in charge?" "Damien. But I tasked Lily with watching him," he told me. I nodded as I chewed on the fluffy muffin. "How much time do we have?" I asked him. He checked his phone. "We should leave here soon," he said. "We should call the kids in and get them cleaned up." "I can only imagine what they have been doing all morning," I laughed. We pulled into Amy's driveway right at 2 o'clock. Junior and Leo were gushing about their morning with Maddox. They seemed to like him, which only made me like him more. Liam helped me out of the car while the boys all climbed out. Leo jumped onto Maddox's back, and I laughed at his spunk. When we knocked on the door, Amy answered and pulled me into a big hug. "Look at all of you," she said happily after she released me. "But wait, who's this?" Her eyes went to Maddox. "Amy, this is Maddox. He is a friend of Missy's," I introduced him. "Maddox, this is my very good friend Amy." "Hello, ma'am," he smiled at her. "Ma'am? Well, I like him." "Come on in, guys," she said quickly. I led the way into the house. "Just go to the backyard. Missy, Lemon, and the kids are already outside playing," Amy called behind us. I followed her direction and went through the house to the back sliding doors. The curtain was drawn on them, so I couldn't see through as we stepped outside. "Surprise!" multiple voices called. Surprised I was as I looked around. A small group stood on Amy's deck where a banner that said, "Boy or Girl? Who cares, get it out," hung above everyone's heads. I let out a laugh. "Amy, what is this?" I asked her. "A baby shower, of course," she gushed. I looked at Liam, who had a horrified look on his face. He was excused from the last couple of baby showers, too overwhelmed by women and their baby craze. Abi came running up to me. "Aunt Isla," she greeted me excitedly. "There's my Abi girl," I said warmly. She grabbed my hand. "Come on," she pulled me into the party. I looked back at Liam and suppressed a giggle. He was giving Amy an angry look, and she just smiled at him victoriously. She knew this was not exactly his idea of fun. The party was fun and far lower key than the first 2 baby showers Amy had previously arranged. We played a few silly games and ate some delicious food. Lemon and Liam argued about whether we were having a boy or girl. Liam was on the side of a girl while Lemon decided our boys were the most handsome things and more of them needed to be in the world. Abi ran off with Missy and Maddox after the cake was served, and the boys played with Amy's younger 2 children. Amy invited Lemon as well as a few of the wolf families in town. The group was small, but everyone was enjoying themselves. Since this was our third pup, there were no presents for the baby. Lemon and Amy got together and got me a gift certificate for an expecting mommy massage at a spa in the city. It was a sweet gift, and Liam promised to take me soon. Amy, did you invite the old man? I asked her while we sat munching on our dessert seconds. Yeah, but he was just like you've seen one pup, you've seen also. I took that as a no, she told me. I guessed it couldn't be helped much. He was getting much older, and now that I was in charge of the inn, he barely left his little house in the woods. He wasn't fond of children either. I made a mental note to have Axel check up on him more regularly for me. It crossed my mind that we were lucky that Mr. Greyback didn't come to the inn much anymore, because Theodore could have been a big problem for him. He had to be old enough to have experienced the war in some way. So, are we going to dish about the boy? Amy asked. Lemon and I looked at each other and laughed. Liam, who was pretending not to pay attention, stiffened a little. She claims that Vlad is still the one, but I could tell something is going on in that heart of hers with Maddox, Lemon said. How long has she known this one? I don't recall Lee ever mentioning a Maddox before, Amy said. She has only known him a few weeks. He just moved here, I told her. They became friends pretty quickly, though. They are pretty cute together, Lemon said. I laughed. She seems to be herself around him. It looks like their friendship is effortless, Amy observed. We all had our eyes on the small group sitting on the lawn near the back fence. Maddox sat close to Missy, but she seemed relaxed with him right by her. My eyes wandered over to Liam, who was now also looking at Missy and Maddox. I wish I could read his mind to know how he felt about the Missy Maddox-Vlad conundrum. I guess we'll just have to see, I mused. When we finally got back to the inn, I decided to find Lacey. We took the kids back to the cottage, and Felix was waiting for us. I tried to tell him he did not need to be there, but he wouldn't listen. Talk to him, I linked Liam before storming out of the cottage and up to the inn. My frustration didn't last long as the pain stirred in my side the farther I walked. I slowed my pace and tried to ignore it as I got to the back door. I made my way inside and to the front desk to look up which room Lacey was staying in. Luckily for me, she was sitting on one of the couches in the front, reading something on her tablet. Hard at work? I asked as I came up to her. Something like that, she sighed. Can I sit? Sure, Luna, she said. Please, call me Azalea, I insisted. She gave me a small smile and nodded. You are probably here to ask about things with Felix, she said. I shrugged, trying to act like I wasn't curious. Maybe. Well, I am sorry you made an effort because there isn't anything to tell, she said. Her voice was small and sad. What do you mean? I should have taken the hint when he ran from the room last night when I was trying to get him to talk to me, but it was pretty clear this morning when he refused to even look at me during breakfast. I think it's safe to assume he isn't interested in a second chance, she explained. My heart clenched at her words. I'm sure that isn't the case, I said. I debated whether or not I should tell her about what happened. It seemed like something he should tell her, but it was becoming apparent that my bodyguard may be a little emotionally closed off. Look, some things were going on last night that may have distracted him slightly. I don't think he meant it personally. No offense, Azalea, but I am not interested in chasing after a man who is clearly not open to a mate. I lost the most perfect man ever to exist, and the moon goddess must think it funny to stick me with one who can't string together more than a few words at a time," she sounded upset. I reached over and grabbed her hand. "Don't give up on him so easily. A rogue killed Felix's mate. Now, I can't tell you how he was before that, but I do know he cared for her very much. The only thing in his room at the pack house is a few photos of her. He's been with me for more than 6 years now, and I have never seen him so flustered as he was yesterday. Yes, he is a hulking brute that doesn't say much. His life is also centered around his job. But he is also sweet and thoughtful. He can be gentle, and I bet the right person can open him up a bit." I bit my lip as I watched her think about my words. "I'm not sure he's willing to open up to me," she finally spoke quietly. "He might not know he is ready to do it yet. When Liam came crashing into my life, I was not ready. I was determined to be alone and content all by myself. Little by little, he made me realize I could be happy, and I wanted to be by his side. Maybe Felix is just not ready to admit he can be something other than a warrior," I reasoned. When she didn't say anything, I continued, "I hope it isn't too bold of me to think that maybe you aren't sure either." Her eyes came up to mine now. "It isn't," she admitted. "Why don't you come to the pack house and stay for a few days? I am sure you don't need to be here for the whole remodel process. Maybe the hulking brute will open up a little," I suggested. She pursed her lips, and her nose scrunched up as she thought about my offer. It was actually quite charming on her. Finally, she said, "I will go if Felix asks me to." I nodded my head and gave her a knowing smile. I stood to leave but clutched my side quickly as pain lanced through me. "Ah!" I tried to stifle my moan. Lacey stood quickly. "Are you okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I gritted out. "Just moved too quickly." Her eyes told me she didn't believe me. Footsteps came quickly through the dining room, and almost immediately, Felix and Liam were standing in the doorway. "Little Luna," Liam breathed out, his eyes wide with worry. I straightened up, trying to ignore the residual pain. "I'm okay," I said softly. They both scowled, not believing my words. Liam looked at Lacey, who was watching us nervously. "Lacey, is it?" he asked her. She nodded her head. "I hate to put you on the spot like this, but was my dear mate here just in pain?" She did say ow," Lacey said nervously. I rolled my eyes internally. I couldn't be mad at her for telling the truth, but now Liam will make a big deal out of a bit of pregnancy pain. "Thank you for your candor," he said as he came over to me. His eyes were glued to me, frustration apparent. Without words, he stopped and scooped me up, lifting me into his arms bridal style. "Wait!" I protested. He gave me a low growl in return, stopping my protests. He headed towards the dining room. "Felix, you are dismissed for the day," he said as we passed Felix. He made no move, not even nodding in acknowledgement. As Liam carried me out, I watched as Felix just stood in the same spot, eyes forward, probably on Lacey. Chapter 35. Missy. Today had been weird, to say the least. It was fun, and the party Lemon and Amy threw together was excellent. I also enjoyed shopping with Lemon beforehand. I was pretty sure I was overthinking things because all of a sudden, it seemed like Maddox was always standing or sitting closer to me. And I liked it. I slung my arm over my very warm face. Vlad is my mate, so why were these thoughts going through my head? Vlad called me earlier, and I let it go to voicemail. He sent me a text message after, asking me to call him when I was free. I never told him that Maddox came with me this weekend. For some reason, I wasn't looking forward to calling him. I knew I couldn't put it off forever, but it just felt weird for some reason. I sighed and pulled out my phone, staring at his name on the dialer. In a cruel twist of fate, my screen lit up with an incoming call from V. Mustering up my resolve, I flicked the green phone icon and answered. "Hey," I said. "Hey, princess. I've been trying to get a hold of you." He sounded upset or maybe annoyed. "Sorry. Lee's friends threw her a baby shower, and we were all there most of the day," I apologized. "Oh," he said. Silence stretched between us. "I miss you," he said as someone knocked on the door. I sat up, looking confused. The door cracked open, and Maddox popped his head in. "Oh, you're on the phone," he whispered. I shook my head quickly, motioning for him to come in. "Hey, I have to go. I'll text you tomorrow, okay?" I said into my phone. "Wait, why?" he asked. "I just do." "Sorry," I said. I hung up before he could argue any more. "You didn't have to hang up on him," Maddox said with a frown. "No, it's okay." "What's up?" I asked. I couldn't sleep, so I thought I might see if you were still awake," he said with a shrug. "Oh," I said. To my annoyance, I could feel my cheeks warm up. Why was I blushing? "Do you want to watch a movie or something?" he asked, breaking the awkward tension. "Sure," I agreed. There was a small TV in my room across from the bed. I sat up properly and scooted over so he could come to sit against the headboard with me. He climbed onto the bed, and I suddenly realized how small it was when we were squished next to each other. Maddox gave me a wary look. "I can move to the end of the bed if you're uncomfortable," he offered. I looked away from him, a little embarrassed. I snatched the remote from the nightstand and handed it to him. "Just don't pick anything scary," I said. "Lacey." I sat on the little couch in the sitting room, looking over at Felix, who continued to stand in the doorway. His face didn't give anything away, which was a little frustrating. I always knew what Harry was thinking or feeling. We were so in sync with each other. I looked over to the desk, where there was now no one standing. I sighed, standing up. I meant what I told Azalea, I wasn't going to follow him unless he asked me to. I approached him slowly, his eyes on me the entire time. I took a deep breath before speaking. "Look, I am only here until tomorrow night. Once I take care of everything for work, I am headed back home. Just because we are each other's second chance doesn't mean we owe each other anything. You don't seem to want a second chance. We can go our separate ways, no harm, no foul." I paused for a minute, looking up at him. His face wore the same neutral, stern expression it had been. I gave him a tight smile and turned to leave. A hot shower and comfy pajamas were what I wanted right now. His presence made me crave his touch, and that was dangerous if this wasn't going to happen. My motion was stopped when his hand reached out and grabbed my arm. I turned my head back to look at him. His eyes softened a bit. "Don't go," he said in a low voice. I knitted my eyebrows in confusion. I waited for him to say something, anything more. We stood there, frozen for a solid minute. Finally, he released my arm. "What do you want, Felix?" I asked him. I waited for his answer patiently. "They almost got hurt," he answered. Now I was even more confused. Who almost got hurt? And how did that answer my question? Clearly, I was going to have to take this slow with him. "Why don't we go somewhere and talk? We aren't going to get anywhere like this, I sighed. He nodded his head. He reached out and, this time gently took my hand. I was taken aback by the gesture. His hand swallowed mine completely, but it was warm and firm. He pulled gently in the other direction toward his room. I let him lead me there, thinking maybe he would feel more comfortable opening up in his own environment. Once we were inside, he closed the door and turned to me. We were standing inches apart as I gazed up into his handsome face. Even without a smile, he was beautiful. My fingers wanted to trace the scar over his eyes, and my heart wanted to know how he got it. I clenched my fists, refraining from touching him. His warm breath fanned my face, and I wondered if I should speak first. I needed to move from him, create space. My body was warming up, and his scent was surrounding me. I stepped back, needing to put that space between us. I closed my eyes, trying to focus on what was important here. I sucked in a deep breath through my mouth, trying not to breathe in his scent as much as possible. Who almost got hurt? I asked. The children, he answered. I thought for a moment. The ones you were with this morning? I asked. He nodded. Are they the Alpha and Luna's pups? He nodded again. It took me a moment, but then my brain started connecting the dots. He is the Luna's appointed guard and probably also takes responsibility for the children's safety as well. She mentioned he had been with her for 6 years and 2 of the boys looked pretty young. He has probably been around since they were born. This was going to be harder than I thought. I turned and walked over to his bed, sitting down and patting the spot next to me to see if he would come to join me. He made no motion to join me, so I sighed and tried again. Can you tell me what happened? Is that why you ran off last night? He nodded his head. I dropped my face into my hands in frustration. Why did the moon goddess give me an almost mute giant as my second chance mate? There were rogues in the territory yesterday. We have fewer patrols around here, so they slip in easily. I gave poor directions to the patrols and left the Alpha and Luna's children unattended. The youngest 2 were caught in a tree surrounded by rogues. It was only by chance they weren't found, he said slowly. I froze, listening to his words. When he finished, I looked up slowly from my hands to see him staring at the ground. That is why you ran out of here? Because the children were in danger. He nodded again. But if they are okay now, why have you deliberately ignored me? His fists clenched. I failed my Alpha and endangered the future Alpha. I was at a loss here. I can understand being upset that the pups were in danger, but they were okay, so why was he still so worked up? Felix, do you want me here? I finally asked. Maybe a direct approach would get me the answers I was trying to find. I observed him. He turned his eyes to me slowly, then nodded once more. His face was still expressionless, but his eyes were a different story. I couldn't figure out what was going on in his head, but he was sincere. He wanted me here. I let out a breath. Felix, I need you to communicate with me. You're so silent and stoic. I don't know what to think. Azalea asked me to come to your pack house, please, he interrupted. I paused. Did he just ask me to go with him to their pack house? Are you asking me to come with you? I clarified. He nodded. I chewed on my lip for a moment. The only thing waiting for me in my apartment in the city was my half-dead cactus and an empty fridge. I was drawn to the idea of spending time with him, but how were we supposed to get to know each other if he won't open up? All right, I finally agreed. His eyes lit up for a brief moment. I will come back to your pack house with you, but only if you come over here, sit down, and tell me about yourself. Missy. I shrunk down even further into the blanket, not even pretending to keep my eyes above it anymore. I thought you said this was a thriller, I whined in my cocoon. It is, Maddox said from above me. I can turn it off. His offer was no longer helpful. The damage was done by this point. I shook my head inside the blanket. Are you really scared, miss? He asked gently, his voice closer now. I nodded my head but didn't come out of the blanket. I'm sorry, he said. The blanket lifted next to me, and Maddox inserted himself into my little safe place. My eyes went wide at his sudden closeness. His arm came around my middle, and he pulled me flush to him, still under the blanket. Maddox, what are you doing? I asked. I realized that the room was now quiet, he must have stopped the movie. We didn't get to finish our conversation last night, but I did tell you that I wanted to protect you, he said in a low voice. I swallowed the lump forming in my throat. I am okay, I stuttered. I know you are dating Vlad and think he is your mate, but I think you should know that I really hope he isn't. I pray the moon goddess at least gives me a fighting chance at being your mate, he confessed. My mouth dropped open in surprise. Missy, I am going to become the strongest and fastest warrior in the pack. I am going to work harder than everyone else so I can protect you and the pack. I am going to make sure that you don't ever have to be scared ever again. My stomach jumped into my throat, and my heart was beating 10 times its normal speed. Why is he saying all of this? I got no time to process any of his words, though, because there was pounding at the door. Missy, we need to leave. Get Maddox and get your things, Liam linked me. What's going on? I asked, shooting up and throwing the blanket off of us. I need to bring Azalea to the doctor. Chapter 36. Liam. I carry my stubborn mate through the inn and towards the back. She keeps trying to reassure me she is fine, but I felt the subtle panic in her when she was speaking with Lacey. Liam, it's just pregnancy pain. Really, I just stood up too quickly, she tried to soothe me. I wasn't buying it. She was getting bigger, yes, her belly now very noticeable. But she still had 2 months yet to get our pup to term. I ignored her placating and brought her inside the cottage. I took her straight to the bed and laid her down gently. When she tried to move from the bed, I growled. Stay put, I ordered her. She scowled at me but listened. I went over to the kitchenette and started the teapot while pulling out my phone. Azalea is having recurring pain. I think in her side. Should I bring her in? Thankfully, he answered quickly. Uncle, does she have any other symptoms? Fever, nausea, tiredness? She is moving much slower, but I hoped that was just the pregnancy wearing on her. We also had a bit of a scare, so she slept a long time last night. Uncle, has she eaten much today? Check her temperature. She picked at lunch and dinner. The pot heated up quickly, so I fixed Azalea a cup of tea and brought it over to her. She was sitting up against the headboard with a blanket over her lap. Who are you texting? She asked, taking the cup from me. My uncle, I told her. She gave me a pointed look. Oh no. You aren't going to give me an attitude. I am worried about you even if you aren't. Now come here. I reached forward, touching the back of my hand to her forehead. She was burning up. Baby, you're burning up. I'm okay, she said. No, you aren't, I held fast. She is burning up but still covered in a blanket. Uncle, I think you should bring her in. Me now? Uncle could be an infection which is uncommon for wolves. I am concerned. I can be at the clinic in 30 minutes. Me were at the inn. Make it an hour. Liam, what is it? You're making a face, she asked softly. Baby, I need to take you to the clinic. I looked into her worried face. That really isn't necessary. The kids are in bed, and it's late, she tried to reason. No, Azalea. My uncle is worried, so you are going to get checked out. You and the pup's health are more important than the boys getting a solid night's sleep during summer vacation. I was getting a little angrier with her than I meant to. She blanched slightly. I let out a sigh, trying to calm myself. Just sit tight. I am going to get the kids so we can go, I told her more gently this time. She was wise not to argue with me and just nodded her head. Her fear started to seep through our bond, and I know I was scaring her with my own concern. I went to Missy's room first. She and Maddox would be able to help get the boys while I carried Azalea to the car. Her door was shut, so I just pounded on it until I hear movement. Missy, we need to leave. Get Maddox and get your things, I linked her. What's going on? She quickly answered. She must have been awake. I need to bring Azalea to the doctor. I didn't linger at the door, just moved on to the room where the boys were sleeping. I started to gently shake them awake so they wouldn't be worried when they woke up. Leo woke up first, rubbing his tiny fists over his sleepy eyes. Daddy, he asked groggily. Yeah, little man. Daddy needs you to wake up. We got to take a car ride, I said gently. Missy and Maddox came into the room. When I looked over at her, my daughter's face was blushed. I started to wonder why, but Gavin reminded me that we needed to get Azalea to my uncle quickly. Missy and Maddox offered to get the boys and meet me at the door. I grabbed the bags and was happy to find Missy's and Maddox's outside the door. I gathered everything and went back out to the central part of the cottage. After grabbing Azalea's things, I quickly deposited everything in the car before hurrying back to the cottage. Leo was cuddling Azalea when I got back, rubbing her belly lightly while Missy, Maddox, and Junior stood by the couch waiting. Everyone ready? I asked. They all nodded. I went over and picked Leo up from the bed. I'm going to carry Mommy, okay? She's very tired, I told him. 'Cause she's growing my baby, he said in his cute toddler voice. I nodded my head, giving him a smile. Yes. It is very hard work, so I need you to walk with Missy, I said. He nodded enthusiastically. When I placed him on his feet, he bounded over to his sister, but Maddox picked him up and swung him onto his shoulders easily. Leo had to duck because the ceilings weren't high enough, but he giggled nonetheless. That one is okay for our pup, Gavin said. We'll see. I want to test him on the training grounds, I argued. Better than the other one. Gavin grumbled. That I did agree with. I grabbed up Azalea in my arms, and we were all off to the car. When we pulled into the pack house, I turned to Missy, and she answered before I could even ask her, we'll take them in and tuck them in their beds. I smiled. That's my girl. I parked near the front doors, and they both hopped out. Junior followed them silently, still tired and clearly not wanting to be awake right now. Leo had fallen back asleep in his car seat. Maddox unbuckled him and effortlessly pulled him from the car. They headed inside, and I took off to the clinic immediately. Missy. Maddox carried a limp Leo, and I pushed Junior all the way up to their rooms. Junior went inside his room and slammed the door behind us, not wanting to be put to bed. I didn't blame the kid. He wasn't a morning person, and waking him up before he had at least 8 hours of sleep was akin to terrorism for him. I led Maddox into Leo's room and pulled back his comforters so Maddox could lay him down. He barely made a move as we covered him up and left. Once outside in the hall, we stopped and looked at each other. The drive from the inn had been a little awkward. All I could think about the whole time was what he had said about keeping me safe. Surely, some of this had to be coming from how he lost his pack? We stood a few inches apart, but I couldn't bring myself to look him in the eye now that we were alone. Suddenly, my fingernails were very interesting. "You don't have to say anything," Maddox said softly. I looked up at him tentatively. He was smiling at me. "I just needed to tell you. I thought you should know there is more out there for you if Vlad turns out not to be your mate." He didn't wait for me to respond. He leaned forward and placed a soft kiss on my forehead before turning around and heading down the hallway. I stood there a little dazed, watching him disappear. "Missy, what is going on? Why is Maddox in the pack house?" Lily's voice interrupted my thoughts. I shook off all the weird goosebumps on my skin and answered her. "Liam brought us home because he needs to take Azalea to the doctor. He dropped us off and drove over there," I told her. "Goddess, what is going on?" she asked worriedly. "I don't know. We all just got in the car and came home." Liam was tense the whole ride back, so there wasn't much conversation going on in the car. I turned and headed to my room. I needed to sleep because this all felt like some sort of weird dream. Azalea. I sat in the hospital bed with my hand resting on my belly. Liam was sitting next to me in a chair, bouncing his leg nervously. His hand kept running through his hair, so I know he was going crazy. I sighed. I didn't want to worry him. The pain was starting to get to me, but it wasn't anything I couldn't manage. Finally, Dr. Ron joined us. Liam shot up from his chair immediately. "Calm down, nephew," he said, holding up his hand. "Azalea, you seem to be worrying more than just your mate." He grabbed the chart from the end of the bed and started looking at vitals his night nurse had already taken. "Seems you are running a fever, and your blood pressure is a little high," he told me, looking up at me. "Dr. Ron, really, I'm okay. I just need some sleep," I tried to persuade him. "All in good time. Sit up, lean forward a bit for me," he said, coming over to my side. I gave Liam a sideways glance, and his face was severe. I sighed and did as I was told. Dr. Ron started carefully pushing along my back. When he got down lower, I winced. Is this where the pain comes from?" he asked. I think so," I answered. "Have you been nauseous recently?" "Well, yet. I'm pregnant," I said. "More than your average morning sickness? Maybe foods are upsetting you when you least expect them to." "My appetite has been slimming the past couple of days," I admitted. "All right, Luna. I think my suspicions are true. I believe you are dealing with an infection. This pregnancy must really not be agreeing with you. I am going to take some blood to test and see if we can narrow this down. In the meantime, I am going to start you on a broad-spectrum medicine to start attacking this head-on." I nodded my head. "So, am I stuck here for the night then?" "Tonight, and probably another day or two. I want to make sure this doesn't spread or get worse," he said. My heart sunk. I did not want to be stuck in a hospital bed for days. I turned to Liam, and he shook his head. Dr. Ron got to work drawing the blood he needed to test, and his nurse came in to start and pour in my arm with medicine. It was cold and uncomfortable. When they both left, Liam was standing next to me. His hand rubbed the top of my head gently. "I'm not sorry, little Luna," he said softly. "I know," I sighed, resigned. "I wish you would tell me when you aren't feeling well," he said. "If we came to see your uncle every time I felt the slightest bit off, we would live in his office, Liam. I am pregnant, and my body isn't suited for werewolf pregnancies," I explained. I looked up at him, and I could see how upset he was. His expression was making my heart clench. There would always be some part of him that blamed himself for my physical limitations. "I'm sorry, little Luna. We shouldn't have left this up to chance," his voice quivered. He leaned down, resting his head against mine. I reached up to cup his cheek. "The moon goddess wanted us to have another pup, Liam. Everything is going to be fine," I tried to reassure him. "I can't lose you. Azalea, I won't survive. The sun would never rise again if something happened to you," he confessed. "Liam," I whispered. I wanted him to hold me, I wanted to be close to him. I didn't even have to ask because, without words, he picked me up just enough to reposition me and climb into the bed next to me. He was careful of my fore, and I quickly found myself snuggled against him, completely wrapped in his large frame. "Sleep, little Luna," Liam pleaded. I didn't put up a fight, I just closed my eyes and breathed deeply, letting my favorite forestry scent lull me to sleep. Chapter 37. I was shaken awake by a strong hand. I blinked my eyes open quickly, trying not to move much so I wouldn't wake Azalea. I turned my head to see Damien standing next to the bed. "Hey," I said, confused. "How is she?" he asked. I looked back at Azalea sleeping soundly against me. "She should be fine. Infection is what my uncle thinks," I told him. He nodded. "I need you to come with me," he said in an unsure voice. "What is going on?" I asked, more alert now. "There are more rogues at the border. They are seeking refuge as well, but they also said they had been chased for days by another group," he told me. "Lily can stay with Azalea." Azalea began to stir. I tried to rub her back and settle her down, but it had the opposite effect. "What's going on?" she grumbled groggily. "It's okay. I just need to go with Damien for a bit. I will be back," I tried to cajole her. Finally, she pushed herself up, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. Leo looked so much like her even though she insisted they both looked like me. "Did something happen?" "Nothing you can worry about right now anyway," I told her. She pouted at me, and I leaned forward to kiss her pouty lips. "Fine," she sighed. "But help me out of bed." "Your pup is on my bladder," she complained. I chuckled at her and did as she requested. Then, while she waddled to the bathroom, I turned my attention back to Damien. "Are you okay?" I asked. He shrugged. I guess that was all he was going to admit for now. Lily came into the room. "Jacob is trying to make some room for them in the pack house. Going to be a tight fit. We need to make the other ones pack members and get more permanent accommodations," she told us. Damien nodded. "I can do that," Azalea said, emerging from the bathroom. "No, you are staying here," I scolded. She rolled her eyes at me. "You obviously doubt me. I can do it from here. I just need my cell phone and laptop," she informed me. "You aren't doing anything until you get a good night's sleep. I would be fast asleep if our beta hadn't come to fetch you, now, wouldn't I?" "Azalea," I warned. She was rubbing my nerve now. She put up her hands in surrender. Fine. But I won't be able to sleep until I know you are back. Lily stayed with Azalea, promising to keep her in the bed. She had brought a bag with her with clothes for Azalea. I was thankful that Lily and Azalea were such close friends because I hated leaving her even for a second. It took Damien and I a couple of hours to sort out the new group of rogues and get them settled for the night. We spoke with their appointed leader and got as much information as we could about the group chasing them. By the time we were finished, it was almost morning. I sent Damien to get some sleep, promising him Lily would be along soon. As I left my office and headed downstairs, I was surprised to run into Missy. "What are you doing up so early?" I asked her. "Couldn't sleep," she mused. I eyed my daughter carefully. I knew that sheepish look on her face and the uncomfortable tension in her shoulders. Something was weighing on her mind heavily, but what I didn't know. "Going on a run?" I asked. "Yeah. But just on 2 legs," she said. I nodded, not expecting any more explanation from her. I struggled with the pressure of becoming alpha at her age and was constantly looking for a physical outlet for those feelings. It only got worse when I sent Azalea away and rejected her. Missy moved down the stairs, and I waited, giving her enough of a head start. When I made it to the bottom of the stairs, I was greeted by Austin and Abraham. "Alpha, I was just told you were back, and there is something I should show you," Abraham said quickly. Gavin growled in my head. He wanted our mate right now, not to deal with Gwen's murder. "Is this something that can wait?" I asked in a resigned tone. "You will probably want to see this sooner rather than later," he told me. I sighed. "Austin, can you go over to the clinic and stay with Azalea? Lily has been up all night, I am sure, and she should get some rest before all the kids wake up." "What's wrong with Lee?" he asked me quickly. "She's okay, just needs to be observed for a while," I told him, not wanting to explain everything. "Yeah, I can go. Why don't I have Abigail get all the kids this morning? She can take them over to the park after breakfast," he suggested. My shoulders relaxed a bit. "That would be amazing," I said. "Tell her that I appreciate it." "Anything, Liam? I will leave you two to it," he said, turning and heading for the front door. "Let's talk in my office," I said, turning to lead him back up the stairs. When we got inside, I closed the door and headed over to my desk. Abraham stood on the other side. "So, you found something?" "Yes. By chance, I think," he said, pulling a small bag from his pocket. It was a clear bag with something dark inside. I took it from him, taking a closer look. "Is this a piece of fabric?" I asked. "Yes, Alpha. I found it not far from the prison entrance within the woods," he said. "Couldn't this belong to anyone? I mean, plenty of pack members use the woods," I asked him, confused. "But it does not smell of a werewolf, sir," he said. He nodded at me. I opened the bag ever so slightly and inhaled. Vampire. It was clear as day on the fabric. How was this missed? I know you are wondering how everyone missed it. Not only is it particularly small so that it could have been easily overlooked, but I also have to wonder if many members of this pack even know about vampires. I looked up at him, hearing the accusation in his voice. "Why do you wonder that?" "When we first joined the pack, I asked a few pack members why the pack was named Blood Eclipse of all things. It seems no one had ever really paid much mind to it. One older gentleman got irate with me, though, leading me to believe that the vampire wars are not spoken about in this pack," he answered. "So, you are familiar with vampires?" I asked. I have some knowledge, yes. And what do you know about this? I held up the bag with the fabric scrap inside of it. I may know which clan the owner belongs to, he said calmly. I raised my eyebrows. Which clan would that be? Don't you already have a guess? I did, but I didn't want to put it into the universe. I was nervous finding out that Clan Warwick's sire survived the war. It could mean retaliation at any time now or in the future. When I didn't answer, he went on, I believe the owner to be of Clan Warwick, the same one that led the assault against this pack and its allies during the war. Can we use this to find them? I asked. It's possible. What I would like to focus on is how they managed to get through all the security measures without detection, he said. To my knowledge, no vampire ability would allow them not to be seen by not only people but also cameras. Do whatever you need to find answers, I ordered him. I would like to send the surveillance videos to an associate of mine. He works in tech and will be able to determine if our systems or those videos were tampered with or modified, he requested. As you see fit, I told him. I need you to brief the others later today. The beta needs some sleep right now, but this afternoon he should know. Abraham nodded. He turned to leave. Before he stepped out of the office, he stopped and turned to me once more. Alpha, I hope you can prepare yourself for the possibility that all the recent events are connected, and this will not end quickly or easily. With that, he left my office and me standing there full of dread. Lacey. This is crazy. What am I doing? Sure, he asked me to come back to the pack house with him, and he did speak actual words last night, not many, but some. Was this really happening? Was I really getting a second chance, mate? Was this even going to work out? I called the office first thing in the morning and asked to take a leave of absence. Somehow, Theo knew because they had already received an email suggesting I be rewarded for my hard work recently with an approved vacation. Felix and I agreed to meet at breakfast where he would be able to see what the Alpha and Luna had planned for their visit. He believed they would head back today. I was surprised when he didn't show up to breakfast, making me nervous about accepting his offer. After breakfast, I went to my room to pack my things. If I wasn't going with him, I was going home today anyway. When I was almost finished, Felix knocked on my door to tell me that the Alpha rushed the Luna back to the pack doctor to check on her. That at least explained his absence at breakfast. I still agreed to come with him, and now here we are, in my car heading toward his home. The only sound filling the car was the soft hum of the radio. Felix hadn't spoken a word other than pointing me in the right direction. We had been driving for almost 45 minutes, and I wondered how much further it was. Turn there, Felix grunted, pointing to an almost hidden road leading deeper into the woods. I followed his direction, turning my small car down the bumpy road. Unfortunately, I lived in a city and did not have a car made for this type of terrain. I chewed my lip, worrying about my car making it to their pack house. A warm, calloused thumb grabbed my chin, pulling my lip from my teeth. I looked sideways at Felix, who was giving me an intense look. He shook his head at me, then dropped his hand and looked forward once more. Why did that small gesture make my insides flame up? There was no way he couldn't smell me now in the confines of this small space. My cheeks were warm, and I didn't know if it was from his gesture or the resulting lava flowing through my veins. To my relief, the road seemed to smooth out as we drove, and soon, we were surrounded by a charming small town. Felix gave me no more directions, so I drove straight through, careful around all the activity and people. This pack was larger than I expected for some reason. Within 10 minutes, we were pulling up to a large building with a manicured lawn. It looked like a mansion, and I could only guess that this was the pack house. I pulled up near the front and put the car in park. When I turned to Felix, he was already out of the car and coming around to the driver's side. My mouth dropped open as he swung my door open and held his hand out to me. Brooding giants and chivalry? My brain wasn't connecting. I took his hand and let him help me from the car. So, what now? I asked. Mr. Felix, someone called from behind us. The voice sounded vaguely familiar. His expression didn't change as he turned to see who was summoning him. He had been out of the car for 10 seconds, and someone was already looking for him. I guess he was a little more vital to the pack leadership than simply being the Luna's personal bodyguard. I leaned around Felix's giant frame to see Abe, of all people, trotting over to us. His steps stuttered when he saw me. Yes. Felix mused. Oh, Abe said, recovering and continuing his advance. There has been a new development in the prison situation. I will be briefing everyone shortly. The Alpha is already aware. I believe you would want to be in the meeting. Abe's eyes moved back over to me, eyeing me with confusion. I tried to link him, but it was no use. He had left our pack, so we were no longer connected. Felix nodded. He turned back to me and grabbed my hand with the same gentle grip he had the night before. He pulled my arm, telling me to come with him. With no other choice than to stand here and have an awkward reunion, I followed Felix, who seemed a little tense. We walked into the massive pack house, and I didn't have much time to look around as Felix walked quickly. He whispered next to me. He looked down at me then forward again. Can you wait? He asked in a level tone. Sure, I said. I was here and knew no one except my former pack mate. What else could I do? Felix. It irritated me that Abraham gave my mate a look. He clearly recognized her. After this meeting, I would figure out how they knew each other. I led Lacey through the pack house, up to my room. Her hand was small and soft in mine, and I enjoyed the feel of it. I needed to keep a clear head though. If there was new information regarding Gwen's murder, I needed to be on top of it to make sure I was tracking any threats near Luna Azalea. After the meeting, I would also need to speak with Alpha about her protection. I unlocked my bedroom and led Lacey inside. She looked around as I strode inside, moving over to my closet immediately. I pulled my shirt over my head, tossing it in the hamper before pulling a fresh shirt from the closet. The entire inn reeked of vampire, and it was sinking into my clothes. I turned around to see Lacey standing stock still, looking at me with her big, chocolate eyes. Imperceptibly, I breathed in deeply and realized I could smell her arousal. What is that about? I cleared my throat. Make yourself at home. I'll be back, I grunted quickly before heading out the door. I moved quickly towards the Alpha's office, not paying attention to the teenager trailing me. When he finally caught up to me, he yanked on my shirt to stop me. I turned around with a glare to find Maddox. What? I need your help, he said. Kid was pretty bold. He clearly took a liking to Missy, but neither of them was mating age yet. The boys seemed to like him as well, and the Luna was sure fond of him. I just quirked an eyebrow at him, not having time to help with frivolous things right now. Can you convince Alpha Liam to allow me to train with the warriors? He asked. This one surprised me, but I didn't let on my surprise. Why? I questioned. Why are you so fiercely protective of the Luna? He shot back. This kid has gall. My wolf hummed in approval in my head. That was high praise coming from that bastard. I studied Maddox for a moment, seeing if he would flinch under my stare. I would consider talking to Liam about it. I turned and left Maddox standing there, continuing my way to the meeting about Gwen. "Thanks, Felix," Maddox called. I didn't bother turning to look at him. Chapter 38. Missy. Seriously, why is this happening to me? You've got a bit of drool there. Sol teased me, wiping away pretend drool from the corner of my mouth. Not funny, I grumbled. Sol and I sat near the edge of the woods behind the pack house, watching the warrior class. Now that summer was in full swing, the kids my age that wanted to be warriors for the pack were training 3 times a day, including Maddox. Lee made living arrangements for all the new families in the pack while a few more houses were being built. She helped many of them find jobs too. Only a handful remained in the pack house. Maddox was now officially living 2 floors below me, which wouldn't have been awkward before his confession at the inn. Now my cheeks got warm every time I saw him. Lee ungrounded me a couple of days ago, and Vlad has been here every chance he got. Every time he and Maddox were near each other, they were standoffish and tense. "Can I ask you a real question?" Sol asked. I just nodded my head, my eyes still on the training across the field. Maddox was sparring with one of the older warriors, and he was shirtless. "Why don't you just dump Vlad? You clearly have it out for Maddox. At least you could enjoy your last few mateless weeks before your birthday. You could guiltlessly roll around with Maddox, and I am so sure he would oblige," she said. I scowled. "Vlad's my mate. Maddox is just a distraction," I told her, peeling my attention away from the sparring. Sol pursed her lips at me. "Every time he is near you, you blush. You have completely avoided talking to him since you came back from that trip together. And this is not the first time I have caught you staring," she accused. I sighed. Sol was right. I made up an excuse every time Maddox tried to hang out with me outside of his training because all I could think about was what he said at the inn. "I'm not breaking up with Vlad. He is my mate. Just wait for my birthday," I told her. "You know Maddox has the same birthday as you, right?" I turned to her wide-eyed. "No," I said. "Vlad's birthday was 2 days after mine. I would know on the night of my birthday, but he wouldn't for a couple of days. Yet. He won't admit it, but he's hoping he's going to find out you're his mate. Sulian said he's determined to convince your dad to let him be a full-time warrior when he graduates, so there is no doubt he would be able to protect you," she explained. I dropped my face into my hands. This is not supposed to be happening. I was so confident Vlad was my mate just a month ago. Now, doubt was creeping in. "For what it's worth, you don't seem happy around Vlad. You fit better with Maddox," she said as her eyes moved from me back over to the training session we were spying on. "Liam," I chewed my lip, considering everything Felix just confessed. Somehow his mate knew Abraham, and they acted oddly around each other. Lacey has been staying with Felix for the last week. Azalea has spent some time with Lacey, learning that things are steadily growing between her and Felix. I still haven't found someone satisfactory to augment Felix's protection of Azalea, but we were working on it. Felix stood in front of me with a passive expression. Whether he was expecting me to be upset or not, I couldn't tell, I could never tell. "Let's bring Abraham in and ask him how he knows your mate," I said. So far, Abraham had been an asset to me in the Gwen murder investigation. We knew for sure the culprit was a vampire and that they belonged to Clan Warwick. Felix nodded and left the room. I knew it wouldn't be long until he returned with Abraham. I started organizing and putting away all the paperwork on my desk that I was sifting through when Felix first came in. Out of nowhere, I had an overwhelming feeling of despair, and I knew it was Azalea. I shot to my feet as I linked her. "Baby, what's wrong?" "The boys," she linked back. I ran from my office, heading upstairs. I wasn't sure where they were, but that's where my feet carried me. She was supposed to be with Austin right now, but it wasn't out of the ordinary for her to spend more time with the kids when they weren't in school. "Where are you? What is wrong with the boys? Where is Austin?" I shot my questions at her. I took the stairs 3 at a time and was on our floor. I ran down the hallway, seeing Azalea standing outside Junior's room. She turned to me with tears in her eyes. I skidded to a halt in front of her, my eyes raking over her to make sure nothing was wrong. Then I turned my attention to the inside of the bedroom, utterly confused to find both my sons sitting on the bed with a book in between them. "Little Luna, what is going on?" "The boys are fine. Liam's reading to Leo," she sniffled. I turned back to my children. Leo looked up from the book and waved at me. I gave him a smile and waved back before turning back to my mate. Her lip was quivering, and she looked like she was about to burst. I pulled her close to me, still not understanding what was upsetting her about Junior reading a book. "They are growing up," she said between sniffles. "They won't need me soon." "Oh, goddess! Oh no! This had to be a hormone thing. Azalea was never like this." "Shhhh, I tried to quell her as I rubbed her back softly. "They will always need you, baby. You are their mom," I reassured her. "You don't need your mom. You find every reason not to talk to her," she countered. I rolled my eyes to the ceiling. Now she was comparing me to them. This probably wouldn't end well for me. "Little Luna, that is nonsense. You can't compare me and my mother to you, Missy, Junior, and Leo. It just isn't the same, baby," I told her. She buried her face in my chest. "Daddy, what's wrong with Mommy? Is she leaky again?" Leo's voice asked from inside the room. I turned my head to see both boys looking at us. "She is just sad because of how big you guys are," I told him. "She thinks that you are going to grow too big and leave her." "That doesn't make any sense," Junior said. "I am going to be alpha, and I will always protect Mom." I hugged Azalea closer to me. "See, little Luna? They aren't going to leave you. They love you," I linked her. She pulled her head back, looking up at me with her large green eyes. I leaned down and kissed her softly. "Better?" I asked aloud. She nodded her head. "Where is Austin? Shouldn't he be with you?" She gave me a sheepish smile. I groaned. "You did not trick him into leaving you alone again?" I asked her incredulously. "Liam, I have had a personal bodyguard for 6 years now. There is no reason to keep this up. Let Felix spend some time with Lacey and stop babysitting me," she argued. I let out a deep sigh. "Azalea!" I groaned. This is the 5th time I have caught her tricking anyone looking after her into leaving her unattended. Felix has been spending far less time with her than I would prefer. "Liam," she groaned in mockery. I looked down at her, giving me a wry smile. I could not let her distract me from my point. "We aren't debating this. I will be finding someone to help fill in the gaps when Felix is unavailable, but you will have a guard." "That is final," I told her. Her face dropped into a pout. It was really hard not to suck her lip into my mouth. "Fine," she agreed. And stop tricking them into running away. What happens if you get hurt or something happens with the baby and no one is around to help you? I said, driving in my point. There are people around this pack house all the time. I am never alone, she said. I raised an eyebrow at her. Fine. Fine, she said, laying her head back on my chest. Just hold me while I watch my middle baby read to my youngest baby, she sighed. I walked into my office to find Abraham and Felix waiting for me. Apologies, Azalea needed my attention for a moment, I said as I moved to sit behind my desk. Abraham was seated in one of the chairs opposite my own, waiting while Felix stood with his arms crossed behind Abraham. I am afraid this may not be a comfortable conversation, but I have to ask. Abraham, how do you know Felix's mate? I got straight to the point. He sighed. I figured this would be brought up at some point, he started. Miss Lacey is from my original pack. We used to work together. My eyes darted to Felix to see if this surprised him. Of course, his face remained impassive. I believe she decided on a career change after the incident occurred. What incident? I questioned. The one that led me to move my son and myself from our old pack to this one, he clarified. You stated that was because your mate died, I said. Abraham nodded his head. Yes, it was because she died, but more specifically the circumstances surrounding her death, he said. I was investigating a murder on my old pack lands for my alpha. I came to find out that a vampire committed the crime. As my investigation continued and I was getting closer to the culprit, I began receiving threats. My alpha pushed me to capture the vampire. I did not take the threats seriously enough. Abraham trailed off for a moment, the pain evident on his face. I came home one day, and the vampire had gotten to my wife. He tore her throat out right in front of my son and me. Then he bit Vlad before disappearing. Vlad was sick for some time after that, and I believe it is why his scent is no longer detectable. The wound nearly killed him. Lacey worked for our alpha, so she knew about the situation as it happened. I'm sorry that happened, I said lowly. I looked at Felix, who still stood there passively, before turning my attention back to Abraham. So, this also explains why you know so much about vampires. He nodded his head. Yes. That was not my first investigation into a vampire-related crime, but it was my last until moving here. I chose Blood Eclipse given its history with vampires. Other than the change in his scent, have you seen any other side effects resulting from this bite? I asked. His demeanor has shifted, but I attribute that to the loss of his mother. I sure have changed since losing my mate. The only other thing I have noticed since his recovery is that he has not shifted to his wolf to my knowledge, Abraham told me. I nodded my head once again, mulling over everything he told me. Thank you for being honest with me, Abraham. I appreciate your candor, I said. Abraham stood. Of course, Alpha, he said with a slight bow. Abraham turned to go, leaving Felix and me alone. I see no reason not to believe him, I told Felix once the door closed behind Abraham. His face remained passive. You could speak with your mate about it. Ask her and see if their stories align. Felix gave me a slight nod. I will be with Luna until you are finished, sir, he said before leaving my office. That man may be great at his job, but his interpersonal skills were clearly lacking. Chapter 39. Azalea Delilah, no splashing. I called to the kids in the pool. There were about 12 kids total swimming while Lacey, Lily, and I sat under an umbrella watching them. That girl, I swear, Lily grumbled. I laughed at her. She's just spirited. Even if you don't want to admit it, she is a lot like you, Lily, I told her. Lily rolled her eyes, and Lacey laughed. I don't know how you guys keep track of all these pups, Lacey commented. It isn't easy, Lily said. And Miss Luna over here is voluntarily adding a fourth one to her lot. It's definitely the last one, I said with my hands over my growing belly. Missy and Soul were off somewhere today. The pack daycare was now pretty full with all the new families and children that have joined the pack, so Lily and I helped as much as we could. The pack house is only set up to accommodate a handful of orphans, so Liam and I have a larger home being built for those children without guardians. A few of the new pack members will be handling it under my supervision when it is complete. For now, I was able to enlist the help of some families to foster the children while we get things situated. I hoped it would also help the rogue children integrate into the pack better and make some friends before the school year began. How are you feeling? Lacey asked, looking at my round belly. I smiled at her. Wonderful, I lied. The truth was that I am drained lately. Moving around has become extremely uncomfortable in a noticeably short amount of time as well. After being in the hospital for a few days, Dr. Ron was confident that the infection was under control, and I was allowed to leave. But the hormone-induced mood swings are atrocious. Earlier today, I managed to get Austin off my back only to get upstairs and find Junior reading to Leo. That somehow sent me into an emotional spiral. I feel a tad bit guilty that Austin got in trouble, but my guard duty was handed over to Lily for the rest of the day, which was much more fun. Liam is running out of time to find a second person to supplement Felix as Austin will be leaving in a couple of days with his family for a vacation. Jacob and I have a healthy respect for each other, but Liam knows we aren't very fond of one another. Even though Lily and I spend plenty of time together, I think he would feel safer with someone more qualified. When are you due again? Lacey asked. If I can make it to the finish line, 6 more weeks, I told her. Yet and Missy's birthday is in about 4. What does she want to do for that anyway? Lily asked, changing the subject. I scowled. I don't know. When I asked her a couple of days ago, she just shrugged and said whatever. She seems a little distracted lately. Do you think she is worried about finding her mate? I was terrified on my 17th birthday. The uncertainty of the whole thing had my stomach in knots for weeks before, Lacey told us. Lily laughed. You guys weren't nervous? No, I was extremely excited. But then I didn't find Damien for a while. He's a year younger than me, and I lived towards the outskirts of the pack. I wasn't near the pack house often, so it took a minute for us to find each other, Lily told Lacey. Lacey turned to me. And what about you? Excited or nervous? I let out a shallow laugh. That is a very long story for another time, I told Lacey. She just gave me a confused look but nodded her head. I didn't think it was the right time to tell her about Liam's rejection and subsequent acceptance 3 years later. I looked over at the back door of the pack house to see Felix standing just outside of it. I nodded my head toward him, and Lacey turned, a smile immediately gracing her lips. She's that gaga over that man and hasn't even mated with him yet, Lily whispered to me. I swatted her arm, and she laughed quietly. It's not for lack of desire, girls, Lacey said offhandedly as she stood up and left us. At that, we both burst out into a round of laughter. Lacey. I smelled him even before Azalea tried to tell me Felix was outside. Every time the smell of marshmallows roasting over a campfire invaded my nose, my body lit up for him. We were taking things slowly, but that did not mean the mate bond was not trying to speed up the process. I wouldn't be surprised if I went into heat any day now. I got up, leaving Lily and Azalea with all the kids in the pool. Felix's eyes connected with mine as I made my way over to him. I could see them darken slightly as he watched me. Things were getting better between us, but we still had not talked about taking things further. It wasn't hard to figure out that he was a man of discipline and restraint, which explains why our level of affection has not progressed past holding hands and only behind closed doors. As I approached him, his tongue darted out, moistening his lips. "Hi," I said softly. The corner of his mouth quirked up almost into a smile. "Are you here for me or to watch the Luna?" I asked him. I quickly figured out that the best way to get information out of him was just to ask him questions that required a this or that type answer. He was a tad bit more forthcoming while we were alone but generally quiet. He nodded his head towards Azalea. "I need to go check in with my boss. I will see you at dinner." I asked. "Move in," he grunted. I surprised at his outburst. "What? Here? With me?" he answered. My lips quirked up in a small smile. "Are you asking me to move in with you, Felix?" I clarified. He nodded his head. My heart raced in my chest. "You want me to move to Blood Eclipse?" I questioned. Again, he nodded. "To live with you?" He nodded once more. "Here goes nothing. And be your mate?" He paused for a moment, then nodded his head slowly. My wolf was dancing around in my head in excitement. I was a little surprised by his request. Although I was trying to get to know him, we had not spoken about this yet. I bit my lip as I looked up at him. "Can I think about it?" I finally asked. He nodded his head. "I'll, see you in a bit, okay?" Felix stepped aside to let me through the door to the pack house. Once I got inside and shut the door, I tried to take deep breaths to clear my senses of his scent. Felix just asked me to move in with him, albeit oddly. And I think he wants to accept me as his mate. My wolf and my body were screaming yes at me, so now I just needed to make sure my heart was ready for this. "Liam, that is the 4th time this week," I said. "I know," Damien said. "It's just getting increasingly worse. Around the inn as well. First peaceful rogues, now violent ones. Have we been able to figure out what they want?" I asked. Damien shook his head. "Since we found out about Gwen's murder revolving around vampires, Damien has been more like his old self. I think having an answer finally has given him the ability to focus again. No. None of them seem to have a purpose other than mindless violence. This last group was small, and we caught them quickly, but we should increase patrols everywhere," he said. I nodded. "Let's do that. And we need to hurry up and find someone to augment Azalea's protection. I don't want to worry her more than necessary with this." "Does she know about the attacks?" he asked. "She knows there has been increased rogue activity, but I didn't tell her how close they have gotten. I just need to get someone as reliable as Felix watching her, so I don't have to worry about that on top of the pregnancy," I told him. Damien nodded. I knew he understood after the last 2 times. "Maybe you should give Langston a call. See if he is seeing any of the same things," Damien suggested. "Yeah. Have we gotten the list of candidates from Austin yet?" I asked. Damien shook his head. "I'll go track that down," he said. Damien left my office, and I walked over to the couch and slumped down. I closed my eyes and focused on Azalea for a minute. I could feel her happiness through our bond. Lily or the kids must be putting her in a good mood. I was much more at ease when she was happy. My phone rang, interrupting my moment. I pulled it from my pocket to see that it was Abraham. "Hello," I answered. "Alpha, sorry to bother you, but I heard back about the surveillance tapes," he said. "I thought I should tell you right away." "Please, go ahead," I encouraged him. It was just as I thought, the attacker was a vampire. "Are you aware of their varied abilities?" "Somewhat," I said. "Some vampires develop various telepathic powers. Most have the ability to speak to others mentally, much as werewolves can through our pack link. Others can implant thoughts and feelings into others," he explained. I nodded my head but then realized that we were speaking on the phone. "Okay," I said. "From what my contact found, it looks as if the tapes were looped but for only a couple of minutes. It seems that would be long enough for a vampire to get in and out," he continued. "But how was it that no one saw them? My guess is that they have been sneaking into the pack's territory for a while. They were probably masking their scent to a degree as well. I think they were able to implant thoughts into the guards that evening to open up a clear path for themselves and for the tapes to be looped. So, this took some time to plan. They would have to know our schedules as well as the layout of the prison to move that efficiently." "Precisely. So, you still believe it was Clan Warwick behind this?" "I do," he confirmed. "Thank you, Abraham," I said before hanging up the phone. I dropped my head back against the couch. Were vampires waging war on us again? "We need to kill the vampires and keep little mate and the pups safe," Gavin growled in my head. "I know." Gwen was clearly a warning, but for what I don't know, I replied. "That wasn't the first time the vampire visited Gwen," Gavin stated. "Why do you think? If it were going to kill someone to send a message, it could have killed any pack member. It could have attacked our patrols. It was using Gwen before it killed her," he explained. He was right, it made so much sense. Gwen was getting regular visits from Damien and Mrs. Hale. She had to get them to talk about what was happening within the pack and probably passed that information along. This wasn't good. There was no way that Damien and his father were going to take this well. And I had no definitive proof. I groaned. "Liam, are you okay?" Azalea's voice floated into my head. "Yeah, baby. I am fine," I quickly told her. I didn't want to hide things from her, but I didn't need her to be more stressed out right now. "What's bothering you?" "I can feel it," she pushed. "Nothing, sweetheart. I just need to talk to my dad." "Not the most enticing thing on my list today," I told her. That was the truth. Now that we were on the brink of another vampire war, I needed to speak with my father about all of this. "Well, get it over with, then come swim with the kids," she suggested. I smiled. "I'll see what I can do," I told her. Chapter 40. Missy. An arm dropped over my shoulder as Sol and I walked into the pack house for dinner. I followed it behind me to see Maddox smiling down at me. "Saw you guys watching training. You didn't want to come join," he joked. I ducked out from under his arm quickly. "Yet. I am not the fighting type," Sol said. I looked at her, and she was giving me a knowing smile. "We're werewolves. It is in our DNA, Sol." "I bet you are pretty fast," Maddox said. "Yet, fast to fall on my face," she said, exasperated. I laughed at her, she was pretty clumsy. "You didn't want to come test out your skills out on me?" Maddox turned to me. No. "I'll pass," I said, diverting my gaze to the floor. We entered the dining room as Maddox continued. "Well, then do you want to go for a run with me after dinner? I can't do any extra training tonight, so I thought I would let my wolf out for a bit, he asked. She's busy, V's voice answered. My eyes snapped to him leaning against a table with his arms folded. Hey, what are you doing here? I asked quickly. V's gaze was still on Maddox right behind me. I wanted to take you out tonight, but you weren't answering your phone, he said as his eyes came back to me slowly. Oh, I left it upstairs, I think. Sorry, I told Sol I would hang out with her today, I apologized. V reached forward and grabbed my hand, dragging me toward him. Let's go. I have plans for us, he said. I bit my lip and peeked at Sol. I promised Sol we would have dinner tonight then watch movies, I mumbled, giving him a weak excuse. She'll survive, he scowled. You can't just walk in here and demand she leave with you. How about asking what she would like to do? Maddox shot at Vlad. His eyes moved to Maddox in a rageful glare. I'm sorry, but I was talking to my girlfriend, not the rogue trash, V gritted out. My eyes went wide as I began to panic. I could tell Maddox was getting angry behind me while V looked like he was ready to rip out Maddox's tongue. Okay, let's just go, I said quickly. I turned to Sol. Rain check? I asked quickly. Her face was pitiful as she nodded. I grabbed V's hand and pulled him with me from the dining room quickly, moving towards my room. Just let me get ready really quick, I said. V stopped, pulling me back to him before we started up the stairs. He wrapped his arms around me possessively, burying his face into my neck. I don't like that guy, he muttered. I stayed silent for a moment, just standing in his embrace. He wants my mate, and I won't have it. V, you have to chill out. We are just friends. I have to get along with him as he lives here. And calling him rogue trash was mean, I told him. I know. But I am not sorry. He needs to stay away from my girlfriend, he said. I sighed. Let me go get ready so that we can go, okay? He pulled away from me and gave me a soft kiss before letting me go. I dashed up the stairs, but he didn't follow me. Goddess, don't let him go pick a fight with Maddox. Liam, I was wondering when you would come to me, my father said smugly as we sat down in his study. I need to get back to my mate, so let's skip the pleasantries, I droned. My father gave me a level look. How long have you suspected it was a vampire? Since I found out there was nothing in the surveillance. Those ticks have capabilities we are not aware of. Who is to say they can't be invisible? He answered. Well, we now believe it is one belonging to Clan Warwick, I informed him. His expression grew hard. Impossible, he stated. And why is that? Because their sire was killed during the war. I have intelligence stating otherwise. My father growled. I could see his anger building. If there is nothing more you can tell me to help stop this threat. I trailed off as I stood. If Warwick wasn't eliminated during the war, then he is coming for revenge on our entire family. No one in the pack is safe. Why now? I asked. My father looked away contemplatively. I don't know, but he has probably been planning this for a long time. I nodded my head. Were rogues used on either side during the war? I questioned. My father scrunched his eyebrows. No. As the conflict grew, rogues were scarce. The assumption was that the vampires either killed them or they moved elsewhere to avoid the conflict. How do I kill him? That's not going to be easy. My father's voice was full of uncertainty at that answer. This man was never uncertain of anything. A cold chill ran down my spine. I nodded my head and turned to leave the room. Right now, I needed to have Azalea by my side and the kids in my sight. I entered the dining room to find Azalea sitting at the table with Lily while Leo and Junior were talking with Maddox. "Where is Missy?" I linked my mate. Her eyes found me, a smile spreading across her face. She went to stand, so I rushed to her to stop her. Azalea rolled her eyes and sat back in her seat. "She is out with Vlad," she linked me back. "We should have kept her grounded," I grumbled. "Good evening, sir," Maddox greeted me. I turned to him, giving him a nod, getting the attention of my boys. "Dad!" Junior called happily. They both launched themselves at me, and I was able to catch them both. "Did you guys have fun swimming today?" I asked, holding them both up. They both nodded enthusiastically. "Delilah got Mommy and Aunt Lily all wet." Leo tattled. "She did? She tell Mommy and Aunt Lily sorry?" I asked. "No. She cried when Aunt Lily yelled at her, then went to look for Uncle D," Leo said. Junior just nodded. I chuckled at that, being able to picture what happened very clearly. "Let's sit down and eat, shall we?" I said, setting them on their feet. They moved over to the table, taking their seats. "How was your meeting?" Azalea asked, not being obvious. "Fine," I said in a level tone. She gave me a discerning look. "Let's just enjoy our night." She nodded her head slowly, and I tried to push the vampire situation out of my mind. "Azalea." The boys begged Liam to take them outside to play soccer, so I sat on the sidelines while Liam and Damien played with a group of kids. Maddox, Sol, and Sulian joined in as well. I laughed as Liam picked up Leo, stealing the ball from him, and dribbled it across the field with a struggling Leo in his arms. I felt movement in my belly, catching me off guard. Liam stopped in his tracks, his eyes on me. I looked down at my stomach, rubbing my hand over the place I felt the movement. Liam dashed over to me, crouching down. "Did she kick?" he asked quickly, his eyes filled with excitement. "Maybe," I said. He rested his hand over my belly, smiling. "Come on, little pup, kick for daddy," he said softly. His wish was granted as our baby kicked right where his hand was lying. Liam's face lit up even brighter, he looked up at me with pride swelling in his eyes. "She's strong just like her mama." I rolled my eyes lovingly at him, but Lily was the one to speak. "You know this is your third one, right? And I am just as excited as the first one," he said with a silly smile. Butterflies blossomed in my stomach, and I knew it wasn't the baby moving around. I leaned forward just enough to kiss him. "Go finish that soccer game so we can go be excited in our bed," I whispered into his lips. "Yes, little Luna," he whispered back. He bent down, placing a soft kiss on my stomach before hopping up and running back to the game. "You two are so cute, you make me want to puke sometimes," Lily said as he rushed away. Damien was the same way with Delilah and Lucas, I pointed out. "Lovesick fool," she said, smiling at her mate dribbling the ball across the grass. "He seems to be better," I said. "Yeah," she said, thinking for a moment. "I think he is finally accepting it. Having a lead on her killer helped, I think. I just hope we don't slide backward." I reached over and grabbed Lily's hand. She turned her head and gave me a tight smile. "Little Luna, where are you?" Liam linked me. I was currently standing on the top of the first flight of stairs, wondering why we needed so many floors and why our rooms had to be at the top. "Coming in a second," My alpha, I linked him so he wouldn't worry. I just finished tucking the kids in bed, and Missy is in her room, he said. I'll be right up, I replied. I gave another scornful look at the stairs. I was quickly approaching the point in my pregnancy where Liam realizes I struggle to get up and down the stairs. Each time, he made sure to thoroughly embarrass me and not allow me to walk up or down the steps. Being picked up and carried up and down the stairs by my personal bodyguard was maddening, to say the least. I made it halfway up the next flight of stairs before Liam was trotting down them. He stopped giving me a knowing look. "Taking your time tonight?" he asked. "I'm fine. We just have a lot of stairs," I said stubbornly. "Why don't you let me help you up all these stairs?" he asked. "Or you could do something about all the stairs," I suggested. Liam laughed. "All right. I am not sure, even as alpha, I can manage that tonight. So why don't you grab onto my arm, and we will conquer these obnoxious stairs together." "Fine," I said. Liam held out his arm, and I grabbed onto him, secretly thankful for his help. We moved up the stairs slowly. When we were close to the top floor, he said, "Why don't we get you into bed, and I can rub those feet? You've been running around with those kids all day." I stopped us at the top of the stairs, needing just a moment after all that. "That sounds nice," I said, wrapping my arms around his waist. Liam smiled down at me for a moment, then his face dropped. "Liam," I said as distress came over him. "Liam, what is it?" I asked quickly. Liam's hands came to either side of my face. "There is a large group of rogues trying to cross the border. I need to go help handle this. I don't want you to worry, okay? I can't focus if you are too worried. I want you to go to our room, close yourself inside, and lay down with a book, okay? I will be back before you know it." I nodded my head, trying to stay calm. "How many?" I asked quietly. "About 20. Damien is on his way too. Just go stay in our room, so I know you are safe." "All right," I said, taking a steadying breath. Chapter 41. Lacey. I decided to skip dinner after getting off the phone with my boss. I still have 7 more days of paid vacation time left as I never take it anyway. After Victoria died, I distanced myself from my pack. I had already gone through so much with Harry, and then losing Victoria in such a terrible way, I didn't want to be around it anymore. Abe took his son and left the pack once everything calmed down after she died too. Our alpha understood my reasons. I was still a pack member, I just lived outside the pack. I found a typical, simple job in a human city and settled myself there, completely prepared to be by myself for the rest of my life. I spent time with my family occasionally, but not as much as I used to. After Harry passed, the world lost color. I stopped enjoying things and wanting to be around people. Victoria was a lovely friend during those times. I knew Abe because I worked for our alpha, so I met Victoria on a few occasions, and we eventually became good friends. But losing her solidified my needing to get away from the pack. But that is all different now. Felix is changing things. He is so different from everything I had with Harry, and for the first time in years, I want something. I want to be around him, I want to get to know him. I want to hear him speak, however infrequently. And I definitely want to get closer to him. I need to make my decision soon, too. I am sure being around him for over a week now will cause my heat to start. It is undoubtedly an experience I do not want to repeat. Because Harry was human, I had to approach things in a whole different manner than wolves normally do. I thought I was going to die the first time I went through it. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. Azalea had been kind enough to give me a room down the hall from Felix, so we weren't forced to share. I was grateful only because things had been slightly awkward as we figured out how to navigate each other. I stood up from the small desk and moved to the door. As soon as I cracked the door open, I could smell the roasted marshmallows. "Hi," I said as Felix's large form filled the doorway. He had 2 plates in his hands. I looked over my shoulder at the clock on the nightstand, realizing it was still dinner time. He looked down at his hands and then back up at me. "Did you bring me dinner?" I asked him. Felix nodded. Then it struck me that he had 2 plates in his hands. "Did you want to have dinner with me alone?" The tiniest smile graced his lips, telling me that was what he wanted. I opened the door all the way and stepped aside so he could come in. He waited for me to turn around and lead the way into the room. I plopped down on the bed since there was no other place to sit in the room other than the desk. Felix joined, sitting on the edge of the bed. He set down the plates in between us but didn't say anything. I hadn't noticed he was also holding bottles of water until he passed me one. "Thanks," I said softly. He picked up his own plate and started eating. I watched him thoughtfully for a minute. My heart was already ready for him, and so was my wolf. He may be my second chance at perfect love, but was I ready to deal with his eccentricity? I lived a quiet life to myself. There weren't many people who would come looking for me if I disappeared, at least not right away. Was I ready to commit myself to a mate again? Felix's eyes peered up at me through his lashes. He looked curious and sweet while he ate. I realized the problem wasn't that he was quiet and sometimes challenging to talk to, the problem was that I was comparing him to Harry. Harry was outgoing and extroverted but sweet and gentle at the same time. Felix is exceptionally introverted, but that doesn't mean he isn't gentle or caring. If I am honest, I already know how big his heart is. He was torn up when those rogues almost caught the Alpha and Luna's children. He blamed himself for the situation, and they didn't leave his sight the next day until they were back with their parents, safe and sound. That doesn't just come from duty. He almost hummed, like he was trying to ask me what I was thinking. "You shouldn't speak with your mouth full," I tried to tease him. Teasing him occasionally won me some real words. He finished chewing what was in his mouth before taking a swig of water. "Something on your mind?" he finally asked in his low voice. My wolf purred at the sound of his voice. I nodded my head but waited a moment before elaborating. He just stared at me like I was obviously supposed to expound. "I was thinking about your request earlier," I said carefully. I barely noticed his breath hitch. He shifted on the bed a bit. "Okay. I will move in and accept you as my mate." I smiled at him, and he surprised me with a smile back. It was my turn to lose my breath as I looked at him. He set his plate aside then also moved mine aside. I gave him a confused glance, but it didn't last long because he grabbed my face in his large hands and pulled me to him as he scooted closer. His lips came to mine in a sensual kiss, it was firm and eager. When we finally broke apart, he whispered, "Thank you." My mind took a second to catch up from his dazzling gratitude. "Of course," I managed to breathe out. He was still smiling, and my insides were heating up. "I need to pack up my apartment and quit my job. Alpha Liam will also have to accept me into the pack," I said as I tried to force my brain back to practical thought. Felix nodded, still smiling. "Would you like me to move in with you or stay in this room?" "Stay with me," he said quickly. It was my turn to nod. His eagerness and enthusiasm over this were adorable. He still hadn't let go of me. Felix, we need to talk about mating. I think I am going to go into heat soon, so if you aren't ready, I trailed off. I watched his expression, trying to gauge his reaction. I wanted him, my body wanted him. But it had been over 5 years now since I had S*X with anyone. After Harry got sick, he was weak from treatment, making it difficult to be intimate. When he passed, I had no interest in anyone else until now. Felix's smile faltered at first. His face went back to its regular, passive expression before he nodded and simply replied, "Yes." I had no time to ask him what he meant by that because his lips were back on mine, moving against me softly. I felt myself relax at his touch slightly, and I closed my eyes to enjoy his affection. Hesitantly, I brought my hands up to wrap around his neck. One of his hands dropped to my waist while the other migrated to the back of my head, his fingers braiding into my hair. He used his new grip to pull me even closer so that I was almost in his lap. His tongue poked my lip, trying to get through. I parted my lips, and his tongue slid into my mouth. He tasted me, but he wasn't dominating or controlling. He was slow and gentle, taking his time and not pushing any boundaries. I tasted him back and groaned at the sensation of his tongue over mine. It had been so long, and now, my body was in overdrive. I lifted myself up, taking the initiative to close the remaining distance between us. I sat on his lap, straddling his hips as I deepened the kiss. The hand he had on my waist wrapped around my back, coming under my shirt. Scintillating fire erupted over my skin at his touch. I kissed him even more eagerly now, fueled by those mate bond sparks. He pulled his head back just enough to stop our kiss. "Slow," he said in a quiet voice. "Mark me," I pleaded. He nodded his head. "Slow," he repeated, his eyes also imploring me. I nodded my head, and his mouth came back to mine. He kissed me for another minute before his mouth began to slowly creep across my jaw, laying soft kisses in its wake. A breathy moan escaped my lips. His hand caressed my skin as he made his way to my neck and down to my collarbone. He breathed in deeply for a moment, savoring my scent. My head fell back while he moved. Every time his mouth made contact with my skin, my body grew warmer. It had been so long, I thought I was going to burst from just his mouth alone. "Slow," he almost growled. "Okay," I breathed out. "Where's your mark?" Harry was human. I was never marked. He tensed a bit at my words, but it didn't feel like a bad tense. I looked down at his neck, pulling his shirt aside. He wasn't marked either. "Where is yours?" "Which?" he said before his lips went back to my neck. I couldn't explain why, but Felix not being marked made me want him even more. Both of his hands found the hem of my shirt and began to push it up slowly. I sat up, lifting my arms to give him easier access. He was really taking his time. When he finally pulled my shirt entirely over my head, he just raked his eyes over me. He was breathing heavily, and his eyes were ebony pools. He wanted this just as much as I did, and I didn't need the stiffness poking my core to tell me that. His hands came to my waist once more, and our lips met again. His hands roamed over my skin, touching and feeling me. The feeling was so tender and sensual that it was dizzying. I reached down to his sides and found the bottom of his shirt, impatiently lifting it up. He pulled away and let me rip his shirt from his body. His look was intense, but I was focused on his chest. When I described him like a wall of muscle, it was wholeheartedly true. He was thick and wide, muscles prominent everywhere. My hands came to his chest, feeling his skin and reveling in the sparks that ignited at our touch. I looked back up at him. Slow, he said gently before bringing his lips back to mine. I let my hands roam over his skin, wanting to commit every inch to memory. His hands eventually found their way up to the clasp of my bra, and after the shortest moment of fumbling, he undid the clasp. He slowly slid the almost unnecessary piece of clothing down my arms, sending goosebumps across my skin. His mouth left mine, and his eyes moved down to my exposed chest. Before Harry, I was always self-conscious of my small chest, and some of those feelings crept back in now. A throaty growl escaped his lips while his eyes were locked on my chest. Felix stood, and I instinctively clung to him. He turned and leaned forward, laying my back on the bed. A clatter came from the other side of the bed, and I realized he pushed away our dinner. His eyes were still on my chest. They barely filled his large hands, but his eyes only grew impossibly darker. "Felix," I moaned as he kissed and sucked at my sensitive skin. It was hard to focus on how charming his slight struggle with it was. It had been a while for him as well. He finally got it undone and peeled my skinny jeans away, kissing down my stomach as he moved down my legs. Before touching my panties, he stood and undid his own pants, letting them drop to the floor, so now he stood in just a pair of boxer briefs in front of me. I licked my lips, impatience blossoming as I took in the delicious sight in front of me. I sat up, leaning forward to push his boxer briefs down and free the erection straining against them. I was going to go crazy if he didn't put out this fire he started. I pushed the soft fabric away. My eyes went wide, and my mouth dried up like a desert. Goddess, what was this man made of? I had no answer, but I would gladly accept her challenge. He leaned down over me, nudging me with his nose. "What are you waiting for?" I goaded him. He smirked at me. I didn't wait or ask, I just shifted my weight to roll us over. I was now on top of him while he looked up at me, surprised. "Please," I begged. He sat up, bringing us face to face. His mouth came back to my shoulder, right where the skin was most sensitive. "Felix," I moaned as he repeatedly smashed into that perfect spot just inside. I was quickly approaching the summit as I gripped his shoulders, digging in my fingernails. I felt his teeth grow longer and scrape against my skin. I could feel my own growing longer, and my wolf was ready. "Yes," I moaned out, and he didn't hesitate. He sunk his teeth into my skin right as I found his spot and bit him. Stars. Bright white stars. That is all I could see. Euphoria flooded my body as the feeling started to recede. I pulled my teeth from his neck and licked the spot to make sure it would close. I felt him do the same. My body felt heavy and sated as he pulled himself away from me. I laid myself against his solid chest, sighing. That was incredible, and my whole body was one sensitive mess right now. Felix kissed the side of my head while he wrapped his arms around me tightly. I haven't been this close to anyone in years. His arms felt like home, and I haven't felt at home since Harry left me. Felix turned us over, laying me against the pillows. He let go of me and crawled out of bed. I let out a sad whimper, but he didn't say anything. He moved over to the small closet and returned a moment later. He had a small towel in his hand that he used to gently wipe up the mess on both of us. He tossed it to the floor before climbing onto the bed and cuddling into me. He laid behind me and pulled me flush against him. He kissed the back of my head softly before snuggling into my back. The rest of the audiobooks will be uploaded in the next episode. Join us on Patreon to listen to more unlimited audiobooks.